There we go. We're on air.
All right.
So, welcome back, lads and lasses. I'm trying a new thing on my channel. I'm going to try streaming. This is my first stream. Um, I'm calling it Agree to Disagree, and I'm joined here with Brad Savvy.
How's it going? Hi, everyone. I'm Brad Savvy. I have a very small YouTube channel that I'm trying to get off the ground. And basically, my whole shtick, if you will, is I'm trying to. I'm a coach by profession. I teach athletics and fitness and stuff like that. And basically, my channel is sort of an attempt to expand on that, be a coach to others who maybe have a similar walk in life to me, or people who have similar experiences. Basically, I want to use uh, myself as a teaching tool so that maybe others with similar experiences in life, maybe they can relate and find that they're not alone in their struggles.
Yeah, I totally get that. I was just thinking, I was giggling to myself there because I'm just thinking we couldn't be more polar opposites. That you're a gym instructor and I'm sitting here with a cigarette in one hand and a beer in the other.
Well, no worries. I just got out of the hospital, so I'm not the epitome of health. So.
Yeah, your eyes looking good though. At least you didn't lose it or anything. No.
Oh yeah, no, it wasn't that bad. Thanks. Like I'm super like aware of it now. I've got like this special lens in it right now that's acting as a band-aid from where the metal was.
Ah, yeah,
So
Jesus. I
yeah.
feel bad because I was saying earlier about hurting myself at work, and it seems to have it's got the affliction now.
I don't even know how it happened. I thought it was a piece of dust in my eye for the longest time, so I kept irritating it, and yeah, it just got worse and worse.
Yeah, right. So we were thinking about talking about internet anonymity and sort of keeping your private information safe and all that sort of stuff, weren't we?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and we thought that'd be a good discussion topic because we kind of conduct ourselves slightly differently when it comes to how we like deal with our YouTube channels and our internet presence in general.
Yeah, extremely. Case in point, you can actually see me, and we're seeing your
A little
uh,
drawing.
yeah. What is that, by the way, real quick? Like, where, like, did you draw that or?
Yeah, I got like I used to do art and shit. Like I was gonna do arts and design at university
Okay.
or towards the end of school, but I sort of switched majors, just whole drama.
Okay.
I switched majors at the end, went towards philosophy, and that's what I did
Oh
at
wow.
uni. So
Why the
um
switch?
oh just it was a whole drama just with like, school stuff, shit like that.
Right, right.
Um but I kind of I got dropped into an it was an aesthetics class at school
Hmm.
because they said, oh well, you're into art and stuff, maybe you should try this, it'll be interesting, see if you get anything out of it. And I absolutely just fell in love with it straight away.
Nice.
And I've been hooked on philosophy ever since. My bookcase is just art and philosophy.
Very cool. Very cool.
So yeah, so do you, so I don't know how I was going to ask you, like you've been around on the internet a little bit longer than myself, I think, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm quite a bit older. I'm from the early days of the internet, so like I still
um
remember. Gosh, what was it? Just a ton of stuff, a ton of things that are like used as '90s kids memes and stuff like that nowadays.
I mean, I think my earliest exposure to the internet was probably the early days of YouTube. Even back
Mhm.
then, like it was a completely different landscape then than it is now.
Yeah, it's almost mind-boggling for me to think about because when YouTube first came out, it was a lot like Photo Bucket. It was just a place where you kept your videos, and I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
think I don't think anybody ever foresaw it like like redefining the media landscape or how we consume media.
Oh, I don't think that's. Yeah, I mean, it was almost like it's almost what Instagram is now. Like Instagram today is
Yeah,
kind of what YouTube was back then. It's just like a glorified photo album, essentially.
basically, yeah, but it's showing a lot of potential, again for like all these other things. It's connecting people in a way I don't think anybody originally conceived.
No, yeah, I'm looking forward to see how Instagram goes. So it'd be interesting to see where it goes. So when you started your channel initially, were you thinking much about sort of like security and anonymity or anything like that, or were you just wanting to get your voice out there and not thinking much about it?
Uh, this is actually not my first channel. I have tried to start a YouTube channel several times
All right.
in the past. Yeah, and but I never started one with any real uh objective or real goal in mind. It was just always going to be kind of random stuff.
Hmm.
And that's because none of them, that's why none of them really picked up. I think this time I actually have a clear idea in mind that I'm trying to pursue.
Yeah.
And so I'm really happy that those other ones didn't work out, because I was definitely younger, and I didn't think about other people. I didn't think about people I knew finding finding my videos and stuff like that. I didn't
Yeah.
think about people being able to figure out who I was, because like you said, I've been around the internet for a while, and I came up very acclimated to everything being anonymous, and everybody being super far away, super like nobody I knew growing up used the internet in the same way I did, or at least I didn't think they did, because we didn't communicate online like we did in person. So there was sort of this dissonance. You thought of, that you've got your IRL people, and then you've got your online people, and you never thought about the two groups overlapping.
Yeah, you didn't mix. I think that's probably my main source of angst is try to keep my channel more not no, it's not keeping myself secret from people on the internet, but more people that I know.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not even like, because I actually a lot of people who I'm close friends with, obviously they know about sort of what I do and what I talk about, and a lot of them have got because obviously I talk more about politics and stuff.
Mhm.
That's sort of more what my channel's orientated about. I'm more orientated around not so much changing people's minds, because I'm not really like into the whole culture warrior stuff. I'm more into just seeing what everybody thinks and seeing what people think of what I'm saying, and trying to encourage discussion in any way I can,
Right.
even to a small degree. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of the people that I know personally, they've got different perspectives and stuff like that, and they like to, I've got a few folk that watch my videos, and then anytime we go out for drinks, they're like, "Oh, you said this, and and I was just thinking about it, and I think you're completely bloody wrong." I'm like, "Okay, let's talk about this over a beer then."
Right. No, that's great.
But I like when I started my channel, I wasn't really worried about keeping myself like keeping myself private in the way that I am now, because initially it was
Mhm.
more when I came up with the channel name and the little moniker, it wasn't so much to do with hiding my identity. It was more to do with I wanted to pick a name for my channel that would make clear to people exactly what I was about, or more or less what I was about, before they even had to like read anything about me or watch any of my videos. They would have a general idea what I was trying to talk about or what I would be about.
Right. And right there, you're already a step ahead of where I was. Like, again, you have a clear idea of, maybe your channel will change, maybe you'll go a different direction in the future, but starting out, you already have a much clearer objective than I did when I started my other YouTube channels.
Well, I mean, I'd been I've been in one before, and it wasn't one that I ran. I was in a channel that was way back. Oh, this was back when I was at school, and it was like a gaming channel.
Hmm.
And I would join in with that, and I mostly did the editing for them, just
Oh,
simple
cool.
sort of cutting and editing, and I would show up in their videos and stuff. So I kind of knew the idea of it, because the guy that was in charge of that channel, he was the kind of head honcho of that. He was really into sort of like, you've got to know what you're doing when you go into your channel. You've got to market your channel, because that's the sort of, or not market it, but you've got to have a clear objective in mind. Otherwise, you'll
Hmm.
kind of flounder and you'll not know what you're doing, and you'll just end up posting stuff that's incoherent, or it doesn't have you don't have a clear sort of path as to where you're going to go, or to what you're
Yeah.
planning. Whereas if you plan it out prior to making the channel and prior to what you're doing, you'll actually have a direction. So even if you're sort of having a dry spell where you can't think of what you want to talk about or what you want to do or what videos you want to make, you can kind of think about the general sort of atmosphere of your channel, and work from that, and maybe come up with something random to do with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I didn't do that with my first couple of channels. I treated it just like I treated my Facebook account or my Instagram account. It was another extension of Brad. So the channel is just going to be whatever Brad's thinking about, and that's not super interesting. You're not going to find very big appeal except to one, maybe two or three people.
Yeah.
A couple of people out there who are just really interested in what Brad has to say. But even like when people say YouTuber, a typical like a certain image comes to mind. you think of like the vloggers who seem to just talk about their everyday stuff, but even they, like, it seems like they're just talking about their lives. But in reality, there is a theme, there's a running theme to the type of content they put out.
Well, a lot of the time as well, you find, especially now, that because obviously we're talking about YouTube developing stuff, and it's just much
Mhm.
more. The content now is much more produced. It's less like this sort of just two people or three people just talking. It's more sort of heavily edited, heavily produced, loads of budget. You know what I mean? A lot of the people that are big in the vlog scene, they seem to be people who are, they've got something that sets them apart. Usually, I would say it's money or something to do with their finances. They've got the big houses,
Oh,
the
right,
pools
right.
and the houses and things like that. And I think people like to watch folk in, they like to see how the other half live. They like to live almost vicariously through these videos, So that's
Yeah, there is that. There is that actually. And interestingly enough, I watched a video recently, just yesterday, that this is completely by accident. I watched it because it was a second part of a series I was wanting to watch anyway, but it was perfect preparation material for this conversation. It was do you know gosh, I'm gonna get the name wrong. Strucci movies. Do you know who I'm talking about?
no,
Strucci movies, I think is how you say it. Well, she has started a series about parasocial relationships. Um, and are you familiar with the term?
more or less, but you can give a
Yeah,
definition for the audience if you want.
yeah. Parasocial relationship. I'm not going to give the best one. It's one of those things I understand like conceptually more than I can articulate.
Yeah.
Basically, if you have a social relationship involves two, maybe more people, and it's a back and forth, right? There's give and take.
Mhm.
Parasocial with the wording, para, as in, likened to or similar to, but not really, like paranormal. Uh,
Mhm.
Parasocial relationships are sort of, they simulate a social relationship, but they're not really. So like, um, the easiest example is the celebrity fan relationship. That's the big one that she talks about.
Mhm.
Is you know, a fan can be really just in love with a celebrity, and they can just pour their heart out to that person and like have all these feelings and emotions going towards the celebrity, but the celebrity has no idea this person exists,
Yeah.
and so it's a one-way street. So it's very one-sided. And the same thing happens with YouTubers. You were talking about people wanting to live vicariously through these YouTubers, and it's real. Like that's part of the almost the formula for success for a lot of them is they create these videos that simulate social interactions. Like think about PewDiePie's videos. That was one of the examples she uses. His whole I say it's his. I mean, a lot of people did this, but the whole playing video games and you as the viewer uh, are just watching somebody else play video games. On paper, that sounds really boring, but what you're actually getting out of it is the simulation of being in the room with your buddy while he's playing video games.
Yeah, it was. Well, I think was it PewDiePie? He was on. It was American late night. I can't remember if it was Stephen Colbert that he maybe showed up at one point. I'm pretty
Might have
sure
been.
he
I'm
said.
not the most up to date when it comes to a late night television.
I mean, we don't get it, or we don't get it here unless you pay subscriptions or you steal it. It's really
Right,
hard
right,
to get a hold of the American sort of TV stuff here, unless I suppose you get some of it on YouTube. But yeah, it
right.
can be a bit of a pain to get a lot of that stuff. HBO is such. I hate it. I hate HBO. But it's almost like the way you're describing it, it's almost to a degree like symbiotic as well. It's that sort of idea. Like you could have somebody almost, or is one way almost somebody getting something from a relationship without the other person gaining anything at all.
Mm. Well, that would be parasitic.
Mhm.
Symbiotic would imply that both people are benefiting. Like the bird that eats food bits off the hippo or something like that, and the hippo, by extension, gets hygiene from the
Yeah.
bird. So, but yeah, and but except even there, a parasitic relationship like that involves a lot of taking,
Hmm.
whereas with a parasocial relationship, it's I mean, it's kind of like that, but it's more like one person is giving and the other person is just unaware that it's going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, but the reason I thought that would be good to like buff up on leading into this conversation is because we're talking about how we conduct ourselves online and how how we want to manage our YouTube channels and stuff like that. And I think it's really important to be aware of that going forward. Like right now, you and I, we've got 14, 24 subscribers. Like in terms of YouTube, I just lost one. That was really heartbreaking.
Oh, I always get it. It fluctuates as soon as you, especially if you're talking about anything that's even remotely polarizing. You'll
Hmm.
find that when you talk about a subject, you'll gain a bunch of people, and then the next time you'll lose a bunch of people. Especially like sort of my channel, because I'm very much sort of undecided when it comes to my politics. I sort of sit in the
Hmm.
middle. So sometimes I'm talking about, a left wing thing that I didn't like or I did like, or then I'm talking about a
Hmm.
right wing thing that I did like or didn't like. And you get the people who are polarized on each side going, no, I don't like you saying that, and they leave. And you get
Yeah.
going, oh, but I actually did, and they'll join, and then the next time around it's the opposite way around. So I've had a lot of that sort of the fluctuation, which I don't mind. What I get frustrated with on my channel, and I think I'd mentioned this to you actually, was that I don't mind people getting angry at the things I said, or even like if somebody watches a video of mine and they really disagree with what I said, and they think, oh, you're completely wrong, you're off base with this. I'd rather than them dislike and leave. I'd rather they
Hmm.
just gave me, like, even if it's the worst comment ever, I'd
Yeah.
rather they gave me that. So at least that I know, at least I have an idea like where other people are coming from, why they feel that way, and maybe I can even talk to them about, well, you seem to think that I'm saying this, or maybe I'm not meaning to say it that way, or like, and we can have a discussion and try and understand each other better. But I seem to be in this situation where it's like, rather than getting that discourse, I'm getting people
Mm.
leaving and coming back.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that entirely. I would much rather get negative feedback than no feedback at all.
Which is
But
we're almost
yeah.
the opposite of the celebrity and the audience, if you know what I mean. Because at the moment, I feel, or at least I feel like I'm trying my sort of, like, I'm honest, like I'm genuine with what I say, and I try and talk about topics that mean a lot to me. But at the same time, I'm trying to give as much out to the audience to try and draw them in, if that makes sense, rather than it being the
Yeah.
other way around at this stage.
Yeah. No, I see what you mean. Definitely. Um, but again, we have to bear in mind that our channels are still extremely small at this moment, and so it's probably not. We're probably not going to get a whole lot of feedback for a while. And
Yeah, and
the key is just to keep putting stuff out.
it's frustrating for me because I don't like the fact that my channel at the moment, it just feels like a commentary channel, which
Hmm.
wasn't really it's not what I'm looking for. I'm more looking for a discourse, which requires, it requires two sides, not just one side spouting
Right.
points of view. And at the moment, I feel like I'm just like the guy that's sitting there going, I feel like this about this subject, and you should
Yeah.
all listen to what I'm saying, whereas I'm not really comfortable with that.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I think you're doing a good thing by expanding out, trying the streaming thing. Because if you really want to have discussions, I mean, it helps to have another person there.
Well, yeah, especially with folk that I like. I like. It's fine having discussions. Like, I've had streams a couple of times on other channels with people who I more or less agree with.
Hmm.
But it's nice to have a conversation with someone who's of a slightly different perspective from myself, because it allows me to sort of address some of the things that I think about, and actually, be a bit more. I'm trying to think the word. A bit more sort of self-aware, and then
Right.
also sort of impart or also sort of sharing my perspective with someone else to allow them to understand where I'm coming from, and maybe for them to sort of be introspective as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. But the thing I was trying to get at earlier was see what I was backing up. We were talking about small numbers. Oh yeah, go like going forward, taking care of our YouTube channel and stuff like that. We're so small right now, we don't really have to worry about forming or cultivating parasocial relationships with our audience because they're virtually non-existent.
Yeah.
But it's good to set up. Um, it's good to set up a foundation that doesn't lend itself to do that very easily. It may happen no matter what.
I mean, it's hard at a certain point, like when you get to like you're talking about PewDiePie, and even like proper, like, celebrities in Hollywood and stuff like that. Like, there's a certain point where you can't. There's no way you can be even in a communicative relationship with your audience at a certain point, when you've got millions and millions of people tweeting at you every fucking day, you wouldn't be able to. It would be impossible even to say like hi or cool or whatever to every single one of those tweets. You'd have to be sitting on your phone all day. You know, it get to a point where you can't engage in that sort of way. You kind of have to just let things settle and let things just be as they are.
But even while it's young, you know, if people are going to communicate with us because of our YouTube content and stuff like that, it might be a good idea to maintain a certain distance, like a level of professionalism almost. And that's where you kind of have the advantage by not putting as much of your personal self out there.
Well, that was something that I was wanting to ask you about, because sort of putting your personal stuff like your sort of personal details, and obviously you're not daft, you're not putting all your personal details out there, but obviously you're putting enough that people know, they know who you are, they kind of know what you do, they know bits and pieces about your life and stuff like that. So do you get the sort of really sort of personal criticism? Like, obviously I'll get criticisms of the things I say or the things I talk about, but do you get criticisms about the things you do, or, you know, your lifestyle and things like that?
I haven't gotten much. Again, like feedback is still very low right now. One person, I think, made a suggestion about how to better conduct myself. That video I made about feeling powerless, or feeling I haven't watched that one in a while.
Is that the one where you kind of like, it's the trying to I remember I could paraphrase it. It's the sort of like, when you feel angry, you feel like you're not able to actually assert yourself properly, and it almost makes you feel mad, sort of thing.
Yeah, something like that. With that, I made that video one day because I made a couple of those first videos while I was at work, actually, while I should have been working. But I had just had I can't remember if it was a customer or if it was my boss, but I had someone in the store, and they were conducting themselves in such a way that basically let them walk all over me. And the only thing keeping me from being more assertive towards them was basically being professional, being polite and stuff like that.
The dynamic of being in a workplace, especially if you're in a service sort of position. I mean, I know that from the job that I do. There's an element of almost, especially when you're in the sort of service industry, where you kind of get treated as another rather than just even a person. You're just a uniform.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the only criticism I've really gotten was on that video. And even then, I mean, it wasn't particularly harsh. I wasn't really ridiculed, and I wasn't really told like, oh, you need to buck up, or you need to, grow a spine, or anything like that. It was, I don't even remember what they said. It was so, I don't want to say it was that forgettable. I just haven't thought about it in a while. That's how low my feedback is currently.
Yeah,
but right now, like, I feel like the videos I have put out, they are so not generic, but they're so non-specific.
Well, sorry,
no, go ahead.
My speech impediment's making me say words in the wrong order.
That's all right. Yeah.
But this is why my videos are so heavily cut, because I'm awful for stuff like that. But what I was gonna say is, you can tackle general topics. You take a concept and you try and unpack it. Or at least from what I've seen, like I've watched through each of your videos once, but I know after, because obviously we kind of had a back and forth a wee while back, where I did a video and you did a response. And after you did the response, I think my girlfriend watched through every single one of your videos.
Oh.
And she was talking about all the stuff. So I think me and her had a conversation. So I know sort of what you've talked about in each video, because we've had conversations about what you've talked about.
Oh, that's cool. What was her general impression, if you don't mind me asking?
She's very much in between us when it comes to like perspectives on various things. She's actually quite like apolitical. She's kind of the opinion that, I don't mind. I have my perspectives on various things, and she kind of applies principles case by case, is essentially how she does things.
Okay.
And she just sort of, she's not too bothered, just as long as things don't affect her. And she has her sort of political perspectives, and she'll vote for a party that she identifies with the most. but she's not
Mhm.
someone that's like really up in politics. You know, I think she
Right.
groans at me when I talk
Mhm.
about this stuff.
Right.
She's not
Right.
interested in it so much, but she likes talking about the sort of general concepts, which I think why she liked your videos as opposed to mine. 'Cause she doesn't watch my content. She hates my
Oh,
stuff.
sorry.
she, which is because I think I'm very much into the nitty gritty of this is the individual thing that happened, and I want to talk about a particular story. Whereas you kind of
Yeah.
deal with the general topics, which allows you can branch out from that and you can relate the things you're talking to. Where like she can relate the things that you've been talking about
Mhm.
in her like day-to-day life or with things that she's experienced. Whereas if
Yeah.
I'm talking about a story that she's never heard about, she's not going to care. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, that's kind of what I was going for. Again, not to be so general that it applies to everybody, um, but to just basically speak to the heart of the matter. Not so much talk about my specific qualms with a specific person, but like, hey, it sucks when you get walked over. Like
Yeah,
more people can relate to that. But I am wanting to make videos on topics with a little bit more bite, with a little bit more of a specific stance. Like I'm working on a video on toxic masculinity right now. I have a very definitive stance on that, so there may not be as much. Yeah, everybody can agree on that type of
yeah.
feeling on that one.
I feel like that's one I'll leave a comment on that video, I think.
Oh, I hope you will.
I'm known for that's my one that I hate on like I think Twitter's good for me in some ways because like I'm limited when it comes to how much I can write. Whereas when
Mhm.
it comes to YouTube comments, I'll leave bloody essays at the bottom of everybody's thing. And
Oh yeah, man, you left me a long comment on one video, and I never got to answer it properly. Was it the response to
I think
my response to you?
it was your response to me, and I
Ah,
sort of
okay. All right. All right.
I think it's more or less an agreement. It was just, I mean, I think it's the same with everything. It's like we're more or less in agreement. It's just, I think the way we want to address issues is different, isn't it? More or less. Or I think
Maybe. I don't know.
it'd be something interesting to discuss, but probably at a different time.
Yeah, yeah. I think it would depend heavily on this subject because I know I've gotten a strong. I know you're trying. I don't know if you're trying to go for more of a centrist kind of stance, or if that's
I'm
just
not.
kind of where you wound up.
I kind of yeah. I say the centrist thing or it's not centrist because that's got a bunch of connotations.
That's just the word that like came to
Yeah.
mind. I'm not trying to pin a label on you.
No,
Just
no, I know. It's I think moderate was the one I was using because it's more
moderate. Yeah, yeah.
vague.
That's the one.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not. I like the description I sort of gave myself when I was talking. It was someone the other day I was talking to. And I says like I'm more or less in political limbo. It's not so much that I
Ah, okay.
have a distinct political ideology. Well, I don't really have a
Mm,
political ideology at all. I kind of just I'm trying to learn because I've come from a very similar ideology as yourself. Like I got
mhm,
brought up in a very with a very sort of strong sense of what my politics were.
mhm,
I was very much ingrained in that sort of political view. And then I did just a bad experience at uni, and it was
mhm.
one of those moments where I was like, maybe I should just think about this. Maybe I should think about, you know, these beliefs that I've put so much stock in. Maybe I should have a little bit of
Yeah.
a look at them. And like it's not that I've cast them. Like I had a bit of a moment when I really first started my channel where I was like, I've cast all these opinions out, and I went almost the opposite direction, which I regret now. But I think it was a learning experience. It's one of those things where you have to go, okay, I did that, and maybe I need to sort of ground myself somewhere in the middle until I've
Mhm,
worked out what I feel. And I might just get stuck here. I might just be in this political limbo forever, just addressing things case by case. But
mhm.
I'd rather be in that. I'd rather be in that sort of middle ground, try to work out what I think and work out what the sort of or what's more compelling, what are the more compelling arguments than just sort of following an ideology one way or the other and not really
Mhm.
being introspective about it, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, and that's a much better, at least in my opinion, at least, that's a much better way to wind up in the moderate position because there are a lot of people are out there who are trying very hard to be in the middle. They don't want to be on one side or the other, so they're putting a lot of effort into staying in either a moderate or a centrist position. And not saying that the two are the same, but they just kind of um, overlap there.
Well, they have a
And
lot of the same principles, and you know, like the moderate and centrist, they are just the same thing, really. It just, I think centrist has become more of a. It became. It was before my time, I think, even that centrist became. It gained connotations through various movements, I think, on the internet and on YouTube. And I think I think a lot of people have actually discarded it now, and they're like, I don't want to have those connotations connected with my political perspective. It's the same thing as like you had the skeptic community as well. That was another thing which kind of people have gone, no, I'm not wanting to be part of that anymore. They've sort of thrown the labels away. But the sort of main gist of the political stance is more or less the same. It's just the connotations that are connected to it are slightly different.
And I think the centrists are the ones that are trying really hard to be there versus people like yourself who just kind of wind up there. And that's a better position, in my opinion, because at least you're thinking things through and you are open to
it's kind of
persuasion.
It's kind of that. Well, it was a topic that I had in my head before I brought up the anonymity topic, which I'm sure we'll get back to at some point. But
eventually, yeah, you know, if we feel like it.
But it was the sort of idea that the dichotomy of a political dialectic, that there is only the left and there is only the right, and you can either be one or the other. And it seems like now there's this stance in the middle where people are they're very ingrained in, I have to be in the middle, and it's almost an ideology in and of itself.
Yeah.
Being the sort of central ground where it's like, and I get it to a point. It's like, I understand why, like, I think a part of why I'm where I am now as well is because I saw the way people on the right and the way people on the left were acting in regards to each other, and even like internally within their own spheres, but particularly the way that they were engaging with each other, it kind of bugged me. And then I sort of saw this middle movement, and so that was kind of where I settled. But I've started to see again, you've got a lot of the same sort of, like, they almost have their own little tight-knit community and tight-knit ideology, and they're almost now, they've got the same interactions with each side now. So it's now almost like a three-way, it's like a triangle now, or a sandwich, or whatever, however you would want to see it. But I just feel like that community has almost become the thing that they tried not to be. It's almost like they wanted to separate themselves from really rigid, dogmatic political ideology, and it's almost like they've created their own very rigid, dogmatic ideology.
Yeah, and it's nearly impossible to hold that position, because, or at least for very long, because if you're on one side of the spectrum or the other, you know, you'll disagree with the other side on issues. But when you're trying to hold a center stance, when you're trying to, you have to you create this false equivalency, depending on the issue.
Yeah.
You assume that because there are two sides, there must be pros and cons. And so you end up like overlooking or just disregarding some of the positions that are.
You end up comparing apples to apples almost, where it's not, which is something I was actually doing, and I'm pretty sure it was you that called me out on it, which was it was talking about like we should try and always engage with each other in the most civil way. And like, obviously it's not, or at the time I was like, I'm sick and tired of everybody shouting at each other and shit slinging and stuff like that, which I still am. I hate the political name calling and shit slinging. I don't see it getting us anywhere, but there is a certain point where you can't have, there's some discussions you can't have objectively. There's some discussions that certain people can't have objectively based on various factors, and there's individual people can't have certain discussions. Like the one I always use, I struggle to have discussions with certain people, but particularly people on the left in America, because I think your culture is slightly different when it comes to your armed services and stuff like that, your sort of military services and that, and particularly when it comes to politics. Well, I see a lot of people. I think it's to do with the sort of conflicts that you guys have been involved in, the politics around them. Not like the UK's been much better when it comes to that, but I think there was a lot of resentment with the way that a lot of these conflicts have been conducted, and why you're there and whether you should be there and all this sort of stuff. And I think there's a lot of resentment now that's generally directed towards the armed forces.
Mm.
or towards soldiers where maybe it's not necessary. And I've had a couple of discussions where people have been like, "Well, I just don't. I hate the army. I hate the military. I hate soldiers and stuff like that." And I really struggled to have an objective conversation about that because one of my best friends I've known since I was a little kid, he's now off. Well, he's luckily enough he's in the country at the moment. He's just on base, but he's had he was just back from his second tour in Iraq.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that I like. Anytime somebody's like, "Oh, I just think they're this and they're that," and I'm like, "Don't you dare say something!" Like, and I go off on one. And
right. No, and I mean, we have that.
we
we have that sentiment here as well. It's difficult. Oftentimes when you hear people say that they hate soldiers or they hate the military and stuff like that, they're usually talking about soldiers and the military as the greater entity.
Yeah,
I don't think.
I mean, it's like the sort of general. It's the general concept, but obviously when you get, I don't know how to describe it. It's something that I've been trying to articulate for a while, but it's just like you get the general like idea, the general concept, and in and of itself, it's not meant to be prejudicial or it's not meant to be directed at the individuals. But as it gets passed down from person to person to person, it gets diluted more and more to the point where it stops being that general concept and starts actually becoming about the people within that the given group or the given
you also kind of have to take it on a case by case basis because there are the military does have its own culture and it can create some pretty like annoying people. Like I don't know how it is in other countries, but here in the States where like we treat military service like just the holiest thing you can do with your life. And because of that, like, and soldiers will hang, not a lot of them. Well, I can't say like to what percentage, because like I've got friends that are in the military. I love them. I have family members that have been in the military. I love them just fine. But I have also met awful soldiers who will hold the fact that they are soldiers over your head and act like the world owes them everything because they were a soldier. And it doesn't even matter if they saw combat or anything like that. They could have had a desk job, but
yeah, it's like they're veterans, but in quotation marks, isn't it?
Yeah.
But like we've got a similar sort of culture here, but it's to do with that. I mean, there's sort of like there's a historical reason for why we've got such an affinity with our armed forces, but we have a sort of similar thing here. But it's not so much that they're like they can do no wrong or anything like that. It's just this sort of general respect. It's just like they do this, they go out and do this, and the individual people who are in the armed forces, if they're an asshole, they're an asshole. And I don't think there's many people, even like, because I grew up sort of, I grew up in the kingdom. I don't know if you know anything Scottish.
I've been to Scotland once, and it was really just a sightseeing tour.
Well, that's sort of Fife. Kingdom's the sort of Fife, and it's like
no, I know Fife. Yeah,
there's a lot of different regimental forces there, and a lot of my family are from Perth as well, which also they had the Black Watch back in the day and stuff like that. So there's a lot of like each community has their own sort of armed I don't know the word for it, but it's like a regiment that was related to that area,
like a militia.
So each place has kind of got an affinity with whatever sort of regiment it was.
I see. So almost like a home team or something.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Well, I mean, it's not like the Scottish aren't known for their sectarianism or anything like that, but
right.
but yeah, it's so you've kind of like growing up in Perth and that you had this sort of like in Black Watch we had the parades and everything like that. But if there's an asshole, they're an asshole. It doesn't change that. I mean, you'd still respect them for their service, but they're still an asshole. You don't get to act as though their military service wipes that all away, sort of thing. So it's a slightly different thing, I think. Similar and different, I suppose.
Yeah, no, like it's very nuanced, and you have to take it on a kind of a case by case basis. But I think what a lot of people are concerned about when they talk about, at least when we talk about here in the States, when people are irritated with the military, we're usually irritated with America's like the way we flex our military muscle. You know, we've got a lot of power. We pour more money into our military than I think any other place in the world, and And, we've got people that are really, really hungry. We got people that need medicine and stuff like that. And just a fraction of that money could go a long way. And yet we are pouring so much of it into kind of a redundant military.
Yeah.
And so when we put all that, it's like, what are we investing in? And so when we're over, getting involved in countries that, it's really none of our business,
Just to
when we're
justify.
acting imperial. What's that?
It was just to justify the money, isn't it? It's just to justify you were pouring funds into the military because we're in these conflicts, sort of thing, isn't it?
Hmm?
Or that's the
I
way
don't
it
even,
struck
I don't
me.
even know, man, because it's such a big number. Like, because it's not like we're the only country involved in uh, foreign military affairs. Obviously,
Oh yeah,
but
well,
we still spend so much more money on it. And it's sort of ingrained in American culture. Like, we love our guns. I don't know if you noticed.
oh yeah. Well, I mean, an interesting thing. The guns thing is something I always found interesting. Is it's kind of, well, kind of the British's fault to a degree because it was to do with you weren't allowed them, wasn't it? Prior to the Revolutionary Wars, you weren't allowed firearms and without permission, were you, or something like that? I can't
I
remember
don't know
what it
that
was.
we weren't allowed to have them. I just know that when we wrote our Constitution, they wanted it guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
But even that, like, a lot goes into that because the line is specifically well organized militia. So there was technically not a guarantee to private citizens, but that's a whole other thing that I'm not like.
I mean, the Constitution's such a. I mean, it's something that it's something it interests me a lot because I think people in the UK, especially at the moment when we've got a lot of we've got a lot of issues when it comes to what you can and can't say and stuff like that. And some of it, like, I understand where the mentality comes from. I understand where we shouldn't find certain points of view acceptable and stuff like that. But it gets to the point where it's like, you've got people making light of these things and using certain subjects as a way to be comedic or to have a commentary on certain things, and they're getting picked up. They're getting lifted for saying things that they're not justifying various ideas. They're not saying, "Oh, I am this," or "I agree with these people." They're just talking about these things, and you can get arrested for it. You know what I mean? Like I'm very conscious of that when I make my channel. That, like, the things I say could actually affect me legally. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I say the wrong thing, even not meaning to, because there's a huge issue with the sort of context regarding our laws. Like, they have a bad habit of going, well, that's the context that you're given for why you said this thing, but I mean, we're seeing a different context, so what you're saying doesn't matter. And I think there's a lot of people in the UK, especially now, that look at the Constitution, despite all its flaws and the fact that it can be interpreted in so many different ways, and it's from a different age, really. But we're still looking at that and going, well, it'd be nice to have these sort of enshrined rights that are there, and we know what these rights are, and they can't be they can't be trodden on without without there being some sort of legal consequence. You know what I mean? And I think there's a lot of countries, especially now, looking at America and going, well, maybe we should have done that. Maybe we should have thought about that.
Right. No, I definitely appreciate the liberty we have when it comes to free speech, but definitely, obviously, there's a huge debate roaring on right now as to, like, where the line needs to be drawn.
Where the line is, which is something that I find interesting, because it's not like I don't think that it's not that I think all free speech is valid speech, or all free speech is you should, like, weigh it equally, or you see it all the same, or that when you see somebody saying something abhorrent on one side and then somebody saying, well, they shouldn't really be saying that, you go, well, you can't say they can't say that, because, or you can't say that what they're saying is wrong because that's infringing on their free speech. Like, I don't think that. I think there should be consequences if you say something stupid or say something awful, but I think those consequences should be social. I think that should be, it should be people criticizing you. It should be people going, oh, maybe we don't want you associated with, whatever business we have or that. But I don't
And
think
generally, that's all it is. Generally, like over here, you're not going to get arrested for you won't get arrested for if you're a white person, you won't get arrested for saying the N-word. It's one of those things. This is why the whole N-word conversation is really annoying to me, because I don't know why a bunch of white guys want to say it, because there's no context, there's no socially acceptable context for us to say it. And the people who are fighting really hard in order to, like, get to say it and stuff like that, like, it's like, why do you want to say it that badly, dude?
Yeah, I mean,
You can't say that it's about free speech if you're fighting really hard to say something that only ever is said with hate behind it, you know. And so like, gosh, I kind of got off on a weird track there. But like the whole thing, these people fighting, saying like, "Oh, you're infringing on my free speech." No, we're not. We're just, you know, that's the social. Those are the social ramifications for you saying things that we don't find acceptable. And now they're trying to like convolute it into this whole mess.
Yeah, and it should just be so like I'm not going to campaign for somebody to like I think I've said this loads of times, but I'm not going to go out and say, oh, this person should lose their job for the thing they said. I think that's entirely up to whoever they work for and stuff like that. And I think if I think they're due criticism, I think everything that everybody says should be criticized. I don't think there's a single belief out there that can't be criticized in some way, even if it's the most, you know, even if you're coming at it from the most well-meaning point of view ever, there can still be flaws and there can still be things that you can have people go, well, I see where you're coming from, but, you know, maybe cut this or maybe think about this or think about it in a different way. I think that's necessary. What I don't think is good is like you're saying people will not get arrested for saying the N-word in America. But people will here. Do you know what I mean? People, if you say that, even within certain contexts, even within like quotations or you know, quoting what somebody says, if you say that here, you've got a huge chance of getting lifted for it. I mean, it's not necessarily, but if somebody decides to report you for it, yeah, you can be gubbed. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's something
like what's the penalty for something like that? Like, how long do they go away for?
Well, the precedent, I don't know. There's a couple set recently. The ones that come to mind. I mean, obviously there was that fucking Count Dankula thing,
right?
He also had the last down. Oh, where was it? I think it was it Sheffield. I don't want to say where it was in case I'm wrong, but I think it was Sheffield. And she posted up. There's a guy had died in a car accident, and she posted up a rap song as sort of commemoration for him passing away, because I think it was a song that he liked or something like that. And obviously it had expletives in it, racial expletives in it, and somebody had reported her. She put it up on her Instagram, and somebody reported her for putting up this song, these lyrics. And obviously the argument for it was, well, she was quoting, and it wasn't there was no malice in that. It was actually she was trying to do something nice,
right?
And she got a fine, and I think she got a fine. She got community service, and I think she got one of the ankle bracelets as well for a while. I don't know if she still would, but it was a few months that she had that. And it's quite a strict penalty. I mean, she was young as well, and she was a minor. So
where did she post the lyrics up at? Was it just online or was it
Instagram? I think it was
Instagram. No, that does feel like a bit much. I mean, even in cases like that, like that is a little. I don't think you should get fined for something like that. I mean, because you can find those lyrics online anyway. So I think then it kind of muddies the waters as to where it was said and things like that. But and again, it wasn't her who said them. Again, it's like you said, she's quoting. So.
It's such a difficult one because, like, you've got a lot of people in this country who are genuinely worried about free speech. They're genuinely worried about, you know, should there be legal consequences for the things you say, even if they're important? Should there be legal consequences? But they get hijacked by various ideologies, or I think at least they get hijacked by various ideologies who are, like you're saying, they're just looking to be able to say horrible things about general groups of people with impunity. And it's this weird sort of situation where I find myself like, I agree with them in concept. I agree with it. We should be able to say what we want, and there should be no legal consequences. But I then feel uncomfortable with the fact that I'm aligning myself with a certain group of people. At the same time, I'm like, well, it doesn't, just because I agree with them on one thing, and even I agree with them on one thing for different reasons, that doesn't mean that I agree with them on everything. And I think that can be a big problem. It's sort of like guilt by association. You see that a lot online now, I think, is a sort of like, you've associated with a perspective or a group of people. That means you embody everything that they believe, and that bugs me. It's like the online. I constantly either get called right wing or left wing all the time. It depends who I'm talking to. Obviously, I'm constantly. It's funny when you hear people who are people on the right saying this or people on the left saying this, and I'm like, I'm neither. I'm not either of these things. I keep getting typecasted to these things because I might have a different perspective, or even playing devil's advocate. Do you know what I mean? And it's this sort of like,
Right.
you don't have to. I think that's why there's so many people wanting, like, going back to the sort of centrist thing. I think that's why there's so many people wanting to jump into this middle ground where they're like, no, just because I have this point of view doesn't mean I'm this, or doesn't mean I'm that. Like, stop typecasting me as a certain thing. Do you know what I mean?
But people are going to label you kind of no matter what.
Oh yeah.
I actually I put out a tweet today because I was reminiscing about like when I finally declared myself hard left, stuff like that. I tried my hardest for most of my life to not be associated with the left because I grew up in a very Republican area. So all my parents, my family are all Republican. A lot of friends I had growing up, they were conservative to some extent or another. Um, and I wanted very hard not to, even though I disagreed with them with a lot of their values, I did not want to be called a Democrat or a liberal or be associated with the left because I grew up in that area. You know, I grew up with these images of, you know, these weak, whiny people who, you know, didn't like confrontation and didn't understand what they were talking about when it came to things like guns and war. And, you know, the people who just turned their nose up at people like me who grew up in, you know, a more rural area and stuff like that. Well, I didn't really grow up in a very rural area, but that was the idea. But it wasn't until, you know, that waned a little bit in college, and I fell into my own moderate position where, I mean, in truth, I was very liberal. I was very much on the left. I just didn't want to say it out loud. You know, I didn't want to be associated with those people.
Yeah.
But eventually, you know, you just kind of have to, say, screw it. You know, like, I am what I am. You can't let what people are going to pin you down as be the deciding factor. You can't, if people are going to stereotype me as like a soy boy or something like that because of certain opinions and stuff like that, fine, let them have their fun. You know, I can't do anything about that. I can't sit down and go, no, you don't understand that. If you let me explain, you know, like, it's just a waste of time.
And it is. I mean, and I understand the labeling thing because of course people want to have something that they can point to and go, you know, this is the easy way to encapsulate a certain point of view.
Yeah.
And if you are within that sort of remit, they'll go, well, that's what you are, and that's fine. That's fine too. Like, that's fine just on a basic level. I have no issue with that. The problem with it that I find is, like, it's the sort of othering, like you were sort of saying. You have this idea of what, not just the beliefs that these people have, but what they are, what they are, and not just that, but sort of like why they're wrong and why they're bad. And it's this complete othering. They're not even people anymore. They're abstract. They're the enemy. They're the opposition or whatever. And that bugs me. That's kind of like, I would rather, my argument for not labeling myself, my main argument for not labeling myself is that I'd like people to address me on the things I'm saying, like the things I'm saying to them in a particular discussion. I don't want them to apply what they think I would believe based on the label I have and then argue with that. I want them to argue with what I'm saying. And I've had discussions like that. I had one similar to that today where I was like trying to talk to a guy about something, and I don't think I'd articulated myself very well. But he was arguing with this idea that he had of what I was saying. And I was saying, well, I get what you're saying, but you're arguing, you're not getting what I'm saying, and I'm trying to say this to you. And he kept going back off onto, you know, what he imagined my perspective would be based on what I assume he imagined I was based on what I was saying. And it gets frustrating. It gets like, you're not listening to me anymore. You're not listening to what I'm actually saying and the argument I'm actually making. You're assuming the argument I'm making based on preconceived notions of what you think I am.
Yeah. And that is an annoying problem. That's actually kind of the crux of the toxic masculinity video I'm working on right now. The problem is not, well, I won't say the problem is not, but like, the main issue with trying to have a discussion about toxic masculinity is that a ton of people are making this straw man argument because they think toxic masculinity refers to all of masculinity. And really, it only refers to a set of values and a set of behaviors. So we can't even have the same discussion because they're going off in a completely different direction.
Yeah, and I think it's the sort of, I think, well, a lot of these concepts, I think as well, there's an issue with I don't know how to word it. It's like it's the kind of the naming of things. I think people have
Hmm.
associations based on the naming. When you think, and when people hear toxic masculinity, they don't think it's toxic masculine traits
Hmm.
or behaviors that are exhibited by men. The same way you can, like, it was like I was saying to you the other day. I'm sure that you get toxic feminine traits, you'll get toxic masculine traits, you'll get toxic human traits that are just exhibited by everybody. But I think a
Hmm.
lot of people, instead of thinking of it that way, they think of it as in toxic masculinity is that all men are toxic. You're saying that
Hmm.
men are toxic, not that masculinity has toxic
Yeah.
factors. And again, I think that's and to a degree, I understand where that comes from because I think it depends on the way that it's been discussed. And it was like I was saying about the military thing. It's like as things go down, the concept itself might not necessarily be bad initially, but as it gets, it's like Chinese whispers. As it gets passed down from person to person to person, it gets diluted more and more to the point where it
Hmm.
maybe wasn't about toxic men or men being toxic, but now there are some people out there who genuinely believe that men are toxic. Do you know what I mean? And then that's where you get this backlash towards it. And I think it is
Hmm.
this sort of like we need to try and make sure that we keep our concepts really clear and what we mean is really clear so that you don't get it both ways. You don't get the people who espouse these ideas getting confused about them, but you don't have the people who
Right.
oppose these ideas getting confused about them. If
No,
that makes
you should absolutely do the best you can, but you've also got to remember that there are some people out there who are just going to try and have disingenuous conversations with you. You know, so there are people that are going to argue in bad faith anyway.
yeah,
So you can't waste too much energy and too much time trying to uh, you know trying to give them the benefit of the doubt and trying to re-clarify over and over for like the 500th time and stuff like that. Sometimes if you want to advance the conversation beyond the introduction, you just have to leave it to them to do their homework. And because if they genuinely want to know, if they genuinely want to engage in this conversation honestly, then there may be a little bit of legwork they have to do on their own. They may have to look up old conversations on it. They may have to look up a few terms they've never heard before. It gets because it's not possible to keep taking people through the introduction of a
yeah,
conversation
over and over again,
every
especially
time
if
they
it's
come in.
asked, which
Yeah.
I think you're tolerant for that because I think that with my what I tend to try and do when I'm online, and I've actually taken, I picked up a bad habit, and I'll tell you about it in a minute. But what I do try to do is like rather than objecting entirely to what somebody's saying or going, you're wrong and this is why, I go, oh well, I mean, I don't understand quite what you're meaning. Are you
Hmm.
like, oh, and I'll pose maybe like I'll pose an alternative to it, and then I'll ask you a question, and you're quite tolerant to the go. You like I've had people before go, well, you should just educate yourself, and sometimes that's a
Hmm.
bit frustrating when you're like, well, I'm asking you because I genuinely want to know what your interpretation of it is or what
Yeah.
you mean by it. Because I would assume that even if it is a concrete concept, it'll have varying interpretations from person to person anyway, because that's just how people are. That's how the like people internalize an idea differently anyway.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes you do get that sort of like, no, well, you should just educate yourself, and sometimes that can be a bit, you know, it can be a bit abrasive when somebody's just is actually genuinely trying to have a conversation with you. Do you know what I mean?
It is, and I agree. That is a that can come off as very um, overly aggressive, but at the same time, I'm more sympathetic towards that response when it's a person who's probably repeating themselves again for like the
Yeah.
500th time. Me, I have the luxury of being able to clarify my statements because I don't get a lot of questions to begin with. You know, my Twitter account's still very small, my YouTube account is still very small, so I'm still in that period where I can flush the conversation out, and I hope in the future I can maintain that. But I can't have the same conversation over and over and over. If it's already somewhere else, then maybe I can point you in that direction.
Yeah.
But it's again, it just doesn't advance the conversation if we have to keep repeating stuff we've already talked about.
Yeah, of course. Well,
Yeah.
try and bring it back a little bit to the topic that we were initially
Yeah.
going to talk about. Because
Speaking
we've
of
gone on
repeating ourselves, yeah.
quite a tangent. Jeez, I think this is a good
Yeah.
thing. This is what happens
Yeah.
with a conversation, though. It just veers off. But
Yeah.
the sort of like when you're talking about people that are abrasive online, and I was going to say is like I've found myself now almost as a way to initiate a conversation because I was finding like doing the super nice thing with people
Hmm.
especially when you've not got an identity. Because I don't really have an identity. I'm not a person. Like I understand it when I talk to people on Twitter, they probably don't see me as a person. They see me as a little cartoon thing with a stupid name. And I've taken to now getting people's attention. To get people's attention, I will start off the conversation in a more abrasive way, and then try and bring it back, if that makes sense. And that it usually gets it's more successful in getting attention from people, but sometimes it can be difficult to then go, I was only using that as an example. I'm not trying to have a go and stuff like that. And it'd be good to be able to have that. Like, I think that's a problem with the anonymity thing, is like, maybe if I'd come out and said, this is who I am, and come out with my real name and my face. I mean, I use my face, but if I'd just done that and I'd just been me, I wonder if people would be more willing to talk to a person rather than an abstract, cartoon character. Do you know what I mean?
They might be. There's definitely something to that. I don't think your icon is particularly bad. You should definitely not expect to be taken seriously if you have a little anime girl, because
well, that's almost the trope at this stage, isn't it?
It really is. Like, it's weird. I don't even know how that came about. That's such a weird trend to to come up.
Weeb culture on the internet, isn't it? The sort of like anime culture is a big thing on the internet. It's kind of
how I mean, like, dude, I love anime. That's nothing wrong with anime, but it's always like these people who have like these really nasty opinions, these really like just gutter trash people. They all have it's not just anime icons, it's little anime girls. Like, it's the lollies and stuff like that.
Anthropomorphized animals as well. That's the other one that I see a lot.
No, the furries, that's a more that's better than it used. That's better than it used to be. I've eased up on furries. Like, I used to think they were the weirdest people in the world, but now I found out there's a lot more of them. And I may have just been talking to actual weirdo furries. So,
well, like, I've never had an issue. Like, it's kind of the approach I've had with everything. I've never really had an issue with furries or the concept of furries, because it doesn't really have an effect on my life at the end of the day. Like, you do you. Like, I sometimes wonder if these things, like, not necessarily the furries things, but there's steps further and further from that. And you do wonder, like, is that healthy? Is that good for a person to be living in that way? But at the end of the day, that's for them to deal with. That's for them to sort of sort out. I can't do that for them. And if they're happy that way, I suppose,
Right.
It's sort of like, what was it? Oh, it was my dad was talking about this, because he deals with folk who suffer from, dementia and stuff at an old age. And he was saying, like, there's a certain point, like, where people have gone, they've lost their mind due to various mental conditions, but at a certain point you've got to go, well, if they're happily, if they're happy in the state that they're in, you get people that have got dementia and stuff, and they get almost to sort of, they feel content, even though obviously they're not them anymore, but they feel content. You've got to just go, well, you've got to just let them be them. Do you know what I mean? You've just got to leave them to it, because if you interfere too much, you actually make it worse a lot of the time. Do you know what I mean?
I don't want to make it sound like furries are mentally ill for being.
Oh, no.
I think it's
sorry. It was more of that was more of an analogy. Sorry, I should have.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I try to tread cautiously whenever using mental illness as an analogy, because it can.
Oh yeah, it muddies the
water.
But it's the sort of idea, like, if somebody's content with their state, even if it's not healthy, even if it's not good or natural or whatever you want to say. I mean, not that any,
or even just unusual to you, unusual from your own perspective,
or that isn't it's not something that you're not accustomed to. It doesn't mean that it's wrong, or that it's, or sometimes interfering with it and stuff makes it worse or isn't a good thing. You're probably better just leaving people to it sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but getting back to the original thing, I think you're. Oh no, it's all right. But I think people will be plenty willing to engage with you, given your icon. I think you come off, like, with your actual dialogue, I think you come off as an actual real person, versus because you can kind of pick trolls out pretty quickly based on the words they use, the dog whistles and the buzzwords and memes and all that other good stuff. But I would advise being cautious. If you're serious about wanting to keep up that defensive wall as far as your online presence goes. I won't say don't use your face, but not using your actual like human face is definitely an advantage, because again, you know, people can look you up, people can recognize you, and if you know, if security is a concern.
Well, that was the sort of next thing I was wanting to get onto. I was going to ask you, just since you brought that up, is the obviously you using your real face and stuff like that. Has there ever been a, you know, do you regret it to a degree, or does it work for what you're trying to do? Do you know what I mean?
I think for what I'm trying to do, it works. I do wish I'd been a little more careful with certain shots. I mean, thankfully the videos are so few right now that I don't think anybody cares, and nobody's going to try and figure out where I am. But if somebody really wanted to, there is enough information in the background of some of my videos that I have up currently that they could probably pinpoint where I'm from. But for the greater purpose of my channel, I think it's very important that people know I'm human, and people know that I'm flawed, and that I make mistakes, and that I'm susceptible to all the same things they are. Because again, I want to develop that connection. I don't want to cultivate full-blown parasocial relationships. I don't want people to look at me as someone to like aspire to become or anything like that. I just want them to see a resemblance. I want to be kind of a reflection of our own similarities, so that they can be encouraged and be like, oh, this guy's doing all right, you know, I'll be all right too, you know, things like that.
Yeah, I think that, like, it's something that I've been thinking about a lot, because I mean, obviously I'm thinking about doing a sort of side thing with Instagram where I'm just doing like short form stuff, and I was going to use my face for that. And I think in terms of security in that, I feel more or less content, because I think I'm safe enough that, you know, like that people aren't going to be able to lock down exactly where I am and who I am and stuff
Right.
like that. I mean, there's always the possibility, but again, like at the size we are as channels, it's not really an issue we have to worry about at this stage. It would be more something that I would regret if I ever did get a more substantive following, that it would be something that I would be worried about, because I have been in some ways, like, even though I don't show my face and I don't use my name too much, or I don't use my name at all, but I don't show my face too much, it's still something that, like, it's still enough, you know. For some people, like, I find it insane how people are able to gather folks' information so easily.
Yeah, no, I definitely wouldn't use my real name. Obviously, Savvy is not my real last name, so at least I hope people don't think it is. But I don't put my full name out anywhere online. I have professional accounts for my actual job that obviously have my real name, but those, I don't let the two overlap at all. I don't follow anybody back with my professional account that I do with my regular Brett Savvy account. The name thing is huge. You got to keep your name to yourself.
Yeah.
If you wanted to do what's that?
Well, it's one of those things as well, like, because I think this is another thing with the anonymity, especially when I'm talking to people like yourself, is that obviously I'm kind of, again, I'm like a cartoon character. There's an element of it that's almost not real. There's almost not genuine, and I get really, especially because there's a couple of folk now that I've kind of over time I've developed sort of, I'll go back to them and I'll talk to them regularly. And there's just a point where it's been like, where with a few people I've been like, well, do you know what? I feel like I've judged these people to be, you know, good people, trustworthy people, and I've said, you know what, fair enough. I'll share my actual name with these people, because that at least makes me feel like they're not just talking to some abstract character. That they're actually, that there's a person behind that, but that, you know, that I keep myself safe more for security reasons. It's actually more to do with my partner and my family around me, because I can, if it came to like bullshit on the internet and people giving me harassment, like, at the end of the day, I can kind of deal with that shit. It's not the end of the world, but I'd feel awful if the things the things I do online affected the people around me. That would bug me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't. Good.
Was it?
Go ahead.
I was just saying that's more sort of why and I now try to keep myself anonymous, because initially that wasn't why I did it. It was actually just it was just happenstance that I did that.
Yeah.
But now it's
Yeah.
more like, okay, I kind of think after seeing what the internet can be like a bit more, I'm like, okay, maybe it's worth keeping myself secret, not even for my sake, but just for the sake of the people around me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's actually a big thing. You want to talk a big difference from how I conducted myself online in the past versus how I conduct myself now. Back before I even knew my fiance, I didn't care about online harassment at all. I would almost be willing to dare people to follow through on their threats, because most of the time they're not going to. I know they're not going to bother. Like the people who spew poison online, they're just talking big from behind the screen. They're not going to come. They're not going to actually come try to attack me. A weightlifter, an MMA fighter, a coach, and a trainer, stuff like that. Like, buddy, I would love to see that. I would pay to see that. But not that I'm the biggest and strongest and baddest or anything like that. I feel pretty confident in my ability to protect myself. But when you get other people involved in your life, suddenly it's not all about you anymore. You don't belong to yourself anymore.
Take it from the 5'6" twig that I think you can handle yourself fine. My excuse for the reason that like everybody that I talked online that's from America is because you guys have got more space, so you've got more room to grow. That's why he's all bigger than me.
No, but it's good that you're thinking about that, even now while your channel is young, and going back to that, even though your channel is young, and we were saying like we don't need to be too worried about people finding us and stuff like that. I think it's good to go ahead and have it in mind and go ahead and conduct ourselves with the intention for growth, because even if like we never break say optimistically 500 subscribers, that's still 500 people that potentially know where we live, and it just takes one to have a bad encounter. Even small channels already see that kind of stuff.
And it's scary, especially when it comes to stuff like I've got a lot of security measures when it comes to like my personal information anyway, because I've had my bank account and stuff. I had my bank account wiped. Somebody nicked all the money out of my account when I was like 17, 18. I hadn't had it that long, and I was doing online shopping. I was being stupid.
Oh man!
And obviously somebody obviously snagged me, and they completely emptied my account. I got it all back, luckily enough. But
that's good.
But since then, I've been like, okay, got like multiple passwords for everything, and fingerprint passwords and stuff like that. Like I'm really nobody's getting near any of this stuff. So in terms of that, I was already kind of set up for it, and I've kind of gotten used to being on the internet, being kind of you just keep yourself to yourself and kind of have a barrier. But when it comes to, I mean, this is kind of the thing that annoys me about it, is because like the whole thing that I'm going for is to have people trust me enough to come and talk to me about things, and to see me as a person that they can talk to honestly, and not feel like they're at risk of being ostracized or attacked or for the things that they say. And to a degree, not having that real face there, I feel like having the cartoon character, though it has its uses, it also has its flaws. You know what I mean? It's good for being a barrier to protect myself from bad elements on the internet, but then when it comes to the things I actually want to achieve, I feel like sometimes it's a barrier to that. And that's kind of why, again, like I like to do once I've gotten to know somebody well enough that I would be willing to stream with them and stuff like that. I'm like, well, this is who I am. This is my name. There you go. So that they know that I'm a person. Do you know what I mean? Because I hate that idea of being like a perpetual cartoon character.
And you make a good point with that. And I don't think I may have to go back on what I said earlier. I don't think showing your face would be that big of a liability. Like I said, I think maybe don't show the background of where you live all that often. Maybe like don't give off any strong markers like landmarks and stuff like that. But if you want to show your face,
that was the thing. I nearly got myself caught out with that. There's actually a video, and I'm lucky with it on my channel, because it's not like where I live. Luckily enough, there's not too many noticeable landmarks. But also, I've got big bay windows on my in my
Hmm.
living room where I'm in the moment. That's probably why there's an echo. It's a huge room. But the big bay windows, and right outside there's a. It's not a landmark, but it's a building that if you were to go, what's that, and look it up, you'd be able to find it, and you'd know exactly
Yeah.
where it was. And
Yeah.
there's a video on my
No,
channel. I'm
keep
like,
that. Yeah,
okay.
keep that stuff out of sight. You have to.
And I was going to set up because I was going to get a cam and everything. I was going to set up literally there, and I'm like, no, because that'll be right in the background, and people
Yeah.
know where it's
No.
at. So, and I doubt again, like at the size of the channel we're at now, like I doubt there's very many people that would be interested in doing anything like that. I mean, it's usually either people come across the stuff that I talk about because it's either a trending topic, or they've stumbled across my stuff because they've let their YouTube play on auto for long enough. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Right.
It's sort of happenstance, but if there was the sort of chance that I talk, because I've had a couple of videos where I've like talked about a trending topic,
Hmm.
and my view count's going up because I'm usually sitting, like 50 sort of views, usually even less than that. Like my recent videos, because I had that sort of break for a while and I've come back. My recent videos, it's usually just my sub count that I get. I get like 40
Hmm.
views. But there's a couple of videos where I got like 250 views, and I'm like, oh Jesus Christ. And it's when you
250
get to
views, really?
that stage when you're talking about a trending topic and you're attracting attention from people who are just interested in that topic. That's when you put yourself at, I feel like at least you put yourself at risk of
Hmm.
attracting people who aren't so much interested in what I'm trying to achieve. They just want the information, or they want someone to attack. And that's when
Right.
I feel like you're putting yourself at risk.
Well, you've also got to consider the long game. I mean, if you consider, um, if we assume that you're going to keep doing this, assume that you're going to keep making videos for a while, people are more attracted to channels that have a good backlog of materials. So like when you get to a certain level of content, I think it's reasonable to expect a much bigger following. And thinking about the long game, thinking about long-term security, even though your channel's small right now, it's good to go ahead and just not.
Yeah, just be
Um,
ready. Be ready
yeah,
for it.
just like don't give them anything they can look up in the future, basically.
Interesting thing that I was wanting to ask you about is that obviously we've been talking about anonymity in terms of how we conduct ourselves on the internet and how it's beneficial and also problematic to us. But another thing
Hmm.
about like internet anonymity that's sort of on the other side of it is obviously it can be used by other people as a means to get to you. Like a lot
Hmm.
of the people who could be a possible threat to various channels are people who use anonymity to
Hmm.
get away with these sort of things. And I was curious as to what you thought about it, because it's something that I've been thinking about, and I've
Hmm.
got a general idea what I think, but I'm just curious what you think.
Hmm. Um, it's I think we've already got a pretty good example of what the pros and cons are, just with websites that allow varying degrees of anonymity. Like you can be anonymous on sites like Twitter and Reddit, but you still have a designated account, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I like anonymity. It's a word I can't say the same way twice for some reason, but but I like it because um, it does give people a little bit of flexibility. If you want to really express yourself, but you're a little worried about how it might be received, or like if you've got some thoughts. Like again, if you let me back up real quick. Let me try to slow this down. I'm really bad about that. Um, Being anonymous is extremely useful when you're trying to like really express yourself, but you're not entirely sure how it's going to be received. It's extremely helpful like that. No doubt that was extremely helpful for queer kids before gay rights and trans rights were a lot more accepted. Like even now, it can be helpful. That way, they don't out themselves and potentially put themselves in dangerous positions, and that holds true for a lot of people. But obviously, the flip to that is it allows people to say nasty things and potentially get away with it. Well, now if you do that sort of thing on a site like 4chan, where you have absolute anonymity, um, you know, you just get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's That's pretty awful. And
And obviously,
as it stands, 4chan's a pretty awful place. But
yeah, but,
if you are on a site like Twitter or Reddit, where you can still be anonymous, but you still have a committed account that can be suspended or banned or something like that when that harmful behavior is reported, then I think that's more helpful. Like complete anonymity is more harmful, but I guess you could call it limited anonymity is
but then again, like it's
better.
like what I was gonna say is the sort of like complete anonymity is sometimes necessary as well. And obviously, the internet's something that's difficult to regulate. I mean, I know there's a lot of stuff at the moment with the EU stuff. I'm not going to get into it because I don't know enough about it. But I know there was
Right.
the scare about the EU regulations that were going to affect the internet, at least in Europe and the UK. I don't know if it would have affected you guys over there, but there's a big scare about that. But obviously, absolute anonymity is also necessary to a degree when you think about things like Arab Spring and stuff like that, where these people needed not just limited anonymity, but they needed anonymity enough that they weren't going to be persecuted by their state for the things that they're saying. You get that all over various parts of the world. You get, China and North Korea and stuff like that, where you have people that they need that absolute anonymity so they can actually speak freely. Otherwise, they'll be squashed by the state. And it's one of those things. It's like I feel like anonymity, this sort of point, and it's kind of a wishy-washy point, but it's this sort of like anonymity has gotten to my view on it is like it's got its pros and its cons, and I feel like you've just got to take the rough with the smooth sort of. You've got to go, this is something I think is necessary, something that's needed, and it has its drawbacks, and some of these drawbacks are awful, but at the end of the day, I think it's a greater good than a greater bad, if that makes sense.
Well, let me make sure we're talking about the same thing. When you say absolute anonymity, like these people who are trying to speak freely without the state, coming to pick them up and stuff like that. Can they not? Like, do they need a place like 4chan to do that, or would a place like Twitter or Reddit suffice?
I mean, I suppose it's different. I mean, I don't know. The Arab Spring, it was Twitter, wasn't it? The Arab Spring, I can't remember. A bit before my time, really. I can't remember what the Arab Spring. I think the Arab Spring was partially Twitter, but then even like on in China, a lot of these sites, the only way that people can get on like sites like Twitter and that in China, because I think they've got their own. Essentially, North Korea and China, have they not got their own internet? Essentially,
Something like that, yeah.
Because they've got, it's not Twitter, it's Weibo, isn't it? Weibo, something like that.
I'm not sure. I know they've got their own version.
And that's completely state regulated. Like everything you say on it is state regulated. So the only way they can, the only way they can sort of subvert that is actually by using Western social media. And I think there's quite strict penalties for doing that. But to a degree, I think that's necessary because you need to know what's going on. And sometimes the outside world, as much as I think people worry about an intervention in that, you sometimes need to know what's going on in these countries. You need to know what's going on, honestly, what's going on. Like not when that guy a couple of years ago, he went out to North Korea to do vlogs, and it was all like, everything's great and the people are lovely. And I went to see all the holiday destinations and completely overlooked all the horrible stuff. And it's just sort of like completely dilutes what a lot of people, there's probably a lot of people who saw that guy's video. I can't remember what his name was, but there's probably a lot of people that saw that guy's video and they went, oh, well, everybody goes on about North Korea being awful and it being a terrible regime, but I'm seeing this and it seems completely different. And that's because you're getting the sort of watered down, completely censored version of it. You're not getting what things are from the people who are actually experiencing things. You're not getting the honest perspectives, and sometimes you need that absolute anonymity because, I mean, if they don't have absolute anonymity, because it's pretty easy I would imagine it's pretty easy because people can get arrested for things like if you put bomb threats in the US on Twitter, you can get arrested, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, threats are not protected. Yeah. No, you make a good point. In situations like that, I guess what we have to do is take into consideration the online spaces that are being used. Like if you're wanting to be anonymous and you're wanting to go to a place where it's safe to speak freely, but at the same time, you're still kind of vulnerable to harsh speech and harsh treatment, then you're better off in a place where people who are going to use harsh speech and harsh behavior where those people can be held accountable, you know. Whereas, and so, you know, you go to Twitter or you go to Reddit. Well, Twitter, I say loosely. Maybe they'll be held accountable. We don't know, but depends on the person. But if you need absolute anonymity, obviously there are other spaces that you can use. I would actually be really. I find myself kind of in an unknown territory here because I don't know much about other countries using Western media to like get under the state's radar and stuff like that. So that's something I need to read up on. I need to get more familiar with that.
I know as well, like a lot of people in the UK now are starting to, they're using sites that are encrypted and things like that because they're worried about the things that they say having actual legal consequences. I mean, it's obviously we're not to the same, extent as these sort of regimes, these dictatorial regimes, but
right.
It's still to the degree where people are like, oh, I need to be anonymous enough that I can, you know, say what I want to say without having to worry about having the police chap on my door. Do you know what I mean?
And that's something else I need to get more familiar with myself is like the frequency at which these arrests happen in the UK. And is it just in the UK, like where it's really bad, or is it all of Europe, like where they have?
As far as
I
know more about the UK and Scotland, and it's weird because obviously the UK it's mostly homogenized laws. Obviously, Scotland's got devolved powers because we've got our own parliament that we have control over certain facets of we have control over certain parts of policy and stuff like that. But for the most part, the UK has homogenous laws. But it does seem like it's very strange that Scotland actually seems to be more prone to act upon these laws than down south, or at least from what I know. I mean, again, I've been focusing more on what's going on in my country,
right?
Because it's what affects me personally, and I'm wanting to make sure that I'm above board with what I'm doing.
Yeah. But no, I need to get more read up on like how often these actually happen, like what the extent of the consequences are, because on principle, I know how I feel, but I don't actually know. I don't know the actual numbers. I don't know the actual like what happens in practice. So
yeah, I mean, as well, like there's other laws like the free speech stuff is one thing. Obviously, we've had the regulations on like blades and stuff like that, which is the whole of the UK. It was more to do with London because there's a huge knife crime crisis in London at the moment, supposedly enough anyway. And but these laws are sort of more or less homogenous. And there's a guy just Dunfermline, which is not far from me. He got picked up. He got lifted by the police because he had a potato peeler in his back. And he got sentenced for that. And you're like, okay, I get it. I get that you're trying to come down on various things, but there's a point where you've got to look at the context and look at the actual situation and go, maybe we can, maybe a strict prohibition on blades is a bit extreme when you're talking about potato peelers.
Extreme. No, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like that's one thing that the gun conversation doesn't have. Like I can get behind less regulation on knives and stuff like that because knives can serve multiple purposes. Machetes can be used for clearing brush. Knives can be used for cooking or peeling potatoes, stuff like that. Guns would make terrible potato peelers.
Yeah, more mashed potato maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know anything about guns actually, so probably not.
No, yeah, like they don't serve any other purpose other than to, then for combat, and even then just for strictly for severe damage and killing. So those need to be much more, in my opinion, they need to be much more tightly regulated. But the knife thing, like you've got to draw a line much further back in the sand on that one.
I mean, there's things. I mean, there are regulations to like. My mother used to work in Highland Management. She used to work as a sort of like not caretaker, but sort of. It was actually to do with animal conservation because you get they used to have problems with farmers using snares on animals, and essentially snares like barbed wire curls, and if the animal gets caught in it, it tightens, but it doesn't kill them, and they get stuck in it and they mangle themselves. And she had a license to carry a blade. I think it was over 3 or 4 inches in order to cut snares and for various things that she had. And so obviously you get licenses to do with various jobs. Obviously, I think people on the Forestry Commission and things like that up here, they get blade permits and stuff like that. So obviously there are ways to verify, and then you get it with firearms here as well. Like you can get. I mean, I think people have the idea that in the UK there are no guns, and it's not at all the case. I mean, you can get firearms as long as you get all the appropriate paperwork and you've got a decent reason for having it. I mean, it's usually farmers or people that are in various trades. You can get a gun. Do you know what I mean? You can buy firearms here. It's usually just shotguns and stuff, but yeah. I mean, again, I don't know much about. I've never been all that interested in guns. I actually got a friend because I was planning on talking about gun control at some point, and he knows his stuff. But to him about it, but that's something I don't know much about. Is the situation with guns in America? I don't think I don't think it's an easy fix. The situation when it comes to gun crime in America. Because I know you just had you had another shooting recently.
Another one, yeah.
And I know it's getting to that point where you're like, it's another one, and it's like, I think it's a multifaceted issue. Like I think on one side you've got, I can't remember if it's the right or the left in your country, but obviously, well, I think the left wing in your country, like we need to have we need to regulate guns, and then the right wing, they're like, well, we need to talk about mental health.
Yeah, which is really more of a scapegoat.
I think it is to a degree, but I actually think there's elements of truth in both stances. I think you need to talk about both, and I think you need to stop. I think they need to be stopped because I think the right wing go on about, oh, well, you're talking about gun control as a scapegoat for talking about mental health and various other issues, and then it's vice versa. Because I've heard both stances being considered scapegoats, and I actually think both of you are right. I think you need to address both issues and actually have an honest conversation about it. But I don't.
Consider this real quick. The left's big concern is really more of which weapons the civilian population has access to, because basically in America we feel like if we go strictly by our values and depending on who you talk to, there are some people who think you should have access to your own nuclear armaments if you want to. But
I've heard these bits and pieces before.
Yeah. But here's the thing: like when right wingers make the mental health claim, that's basically an excuse to not talk about or not even entertain the idea of further regulating guns, so that they can preserve that value.
I actually agree with that. But I don't think it comes down simply to. I think regulation would help, and I think talking about mental health would help. But I think obviously you've come close. I think you guys have been pushing a lot for regulation recently after the recent shootings, because it seems to be escalating a lot recently.
Yeah, it's becoming way more frequent. It was already pretty bad, but it's getting way out of hand.
Really frequent. It's becoming really common. Like we don't hear about it all the time over here. We only hear about the big ones. I hear about it more. Like we used to, like when I was just following the news, we'd hear about it, once every few months. But since I started getting my content more from American sort of commentators and stuff, it's actually like I was shocked at how regular it was, because over here they're not going to talk about every time there's an American shooting, because I think it got to the point in with our media where it was like, well, we're not going to talk about the next American shooting because it's they're so frequent now that it almost has to be exceptional. Do you know what I mean? And that sounds awful. It's so horrible to say, but it almost has to be, it has to be something that would draw attention for us to sort of talk about it over here.
Yeah,
and it wasn't until
there are people here in the States that
realized how bad it was.
Yeah, there are people in the States that feel similarly too. Like some news stations won't talk about a shooting unless it has so many victims. But getting back to like the mental health thing, it's not just that they're not wanting to talk about that. Consider this example. Who was that kid? Shot up a college. It was back in 2014, I think. I forgot his name, but he didn't shoot up a school with weapons that he himself. The kid was obviously very disturbed, and when they want to talk about mental health, they're thinking about, oh, this kid, he's disturbed. He clearly needed help. Let's focus on that. Well, this kid didn't use weapons that he bought. He used weapons that his mentally healthy, perfectly legal mother purchased. So in a scenario like that, improving mental health, which I agree, we do need to treat mental health more seriously. But in terms of the gun conversation, in that situation, better mental health wouldn't have done much at all, because the kid would have still had access to these high power rifles.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and I mean, I there's a part of it as well. Like, I mean, I think this is maybe just, and I think I've talked about this before with people who are pro gun, and I've said to them like, I don't, and I think it's difference in culture perhaps, because I don't understand, like, if you want to go and you want to use, like, you want to have a go on a big machine gun or something, you want to use a machine gun, I'm sure they could have, you mean you've got gun ranges all over the place that I would imagine stock these sorts of weapons. I'm sure you could, and it's not risk free, of course. You've always got the chance of someone going into a gun range and just doing the same thing, but at least that way it's a contained area and stuff. And I don't understand why you have to own the guns. I don't understand why you have to. Why would you want to have, you know, AK-47 or whatever underneath your bed or underneath your pillow? Like, you don't need that. If you're into guns and you like that sort of stuff, join a gun club, and surely you can get the same kick without the risk of, you know, your kids getting a hold of them or anything like that. And I think that's something I don't understand, but I think that might just be because it might just be a culture thing, because it's just not like that.
It absolutely is. You know? Yeah, no, it absolutely is a culture thing, because a lot of these weapons that they're fighting so hard to keep, I mean, they're very impractical for a lot of the scenarios they propose. You know, they're great. They're great for military operations, but, you know, regular civilians aren't taking part in those. So
I mean, like, because over here, like, I mean, like I was saying, you can get guns if you need them. Obviously, we've got prohibition on handguns. Can't get a hold of handguns or anything here. You can, it's like rifles and shotguns. You can get a hold of, but they're utilities. Now, a lot of people see them as utilities over here. I mean, not everybody. You do get your gun nuts over here too, because I think there's a lot of our culture is starting to become slowly Americanized over time. So you get folk like that, but most folk, it's like, oh, I have a shotgun because I go hunting for grouse during the season, or the, you know, or I participate in the you know, the red deer culls and stuff like that, you know, that we have here and stuff like that. Like, that's the sort of reasons that people have guns. There are actually utility. Whereas like, I don't think anybody's going to go hunting for a grouse with a AK-47. It just wouldn't be very effective, you know.
No, you'd ruin all the meat. Like,
that's it. No.
Yeah, it'd be terrible. And, you know, there are communities in America. There's tons of communities in America that would absolutely need access to hunting rifles and shotguns and things like that, even for security purposes. Because there's some. I don't know how the wildlife is in your area, but man, there's some big animals out here. Like,
most of ours have just died. We don't have any actual real predators that are a danger to us really here. I think we've got like maybe a couple of types of venomous creatures, and maybe badgers. You wouldn't want to bump into a badger or something like.
No, definitely not.
We've got a fox in our neighborhood that raids our skips and stuff. Lovely animal, but I wouldn't want to get too close, sort of thing. But that's
we've got foxes all over my city too, and they're cute and they run away. But
they're big here and they're cute. I think we've got a bit of a gang war between the stray cats in the area and the foxes that live here, because you hear them. I'm surprised you're not hearing them, because usually around about like 3-4 o'clock in the morning, you hear that horrible sound that foxes make. Wow. And it just it wakes me up. I hate it.
Jeez. Yeah, no, like, so my martial arts instructor, he lived out like several miles out from the main city, and he had a problem with mountain lions. So like,
I know, that's it. Like, here, you know, we was it the worst one that I think I've ever had from someone getting injured by an animal was at work. And we had in our warehouse, a guy had went in to sort out some of the had gone to sort out some stuff, and he got bit by a rat, and that sounds like the worst out here, you know. Like, we don't really have that sort of issue. Like, I know you guys get bears and everything, like, sort of in America and stuff like that. And that's like nothing like that here anymore.
Yeah, no.
I had it in my head. I know there was a guy who wanted to reintroduce these animals into Scotland for a while, and I had it in my head it was actually Trump, but I don't think it was. This is way back. This is like 2012. There was a guy who wanted to open up a huge nature reserve up in the Highlands, and reintroduce bears and wolves back to the country and try and integrate them back into the country. And everyone was like, no, that's a really, really silly idea. Because like out in where you are, it's a huge, these animals, I mean, you'll obviously come in contact with them, but it's such a huge space you've got. There's so much, like I'm pretty sure you could fit, my country into a couple of your states multiple times, like we're not anywhere near as big. So if you were to introduce these animals again, they're to start to breed, you're guaranteed that they would come in contact with human populaces, and it's just it's not fair on the people in the area, and it's not fair on the animals themselves. And I think it was a daft idea. Can't remember who it was. I had it in my head it was Trump, but I don't think it actually was.
That'd be a really strange thing for him to talk about. I mean, he's already got a lot of strange ideas, but talking about I don't know the last time he ever talked about animals. He likes to hunt. His family likes to hunt animals, but they like to hunt big game out in Africa and stuff like that.
Because he owns a lot of land up in Aberdeen and everything like that, isn't it? Because that's where his golf course is Aberdeen, I think.
Aberdeen? Where's that?
It's right up north. He's got a golf course here, and I think his mother's from Scotland as well.
Oh, interesting.
And so he's got a lot of, like, I know he owns a lot of land here, and he's got like family ties here, so that's why, like, because he was going to come to the UK. I don't know if he still is, but or if he did, I can't remember. But he was
he came to England, I think, at one point.
Did he come? Because I think he was going to come up north because he's got I think it's up in the islands actually that he had family sort of heritage, and he was going up there. I mean, I didn't really give a shit. I mean, like, I didn't even know he'd done it already, so like I just didn't really care. I've gotten so desensitized to the Trump stuff that I'm just like, okay, cool. He can do as he does. I know it's different for you guys because it's you've got to. You either love him or you hate him, sort of thing over there, and it's like,
well, what he does affects us, so
it affects you. I mean, it affects everybody because he's essentially, to a degree, the most powerful man in the world. So it's not like it's not like it goes unnoticed by everybody else. But but what he does, like, he has more direct influence over our lives because he selects his cabinet members, he puts in votes for the Supreme Court and stuff like that. So but we don't really get rest. We really don't get rest over here when it comes to the whole Trump train. Especially if you're very much against him, I would imagine. Because I can admit I've gotten to the point where I'm almost apathetic, which I know it's not the same for you, but I've just gotten to the stage where it's like, if he says something that's exceptionally stupid, I'll condemn him, and if he does do something that's not awful, then I'll go, okay, fair enough. But otherwise, I'm just like, okay. Because I couldn't do it anymore, because the news cycle after the election, even over here, it was just like Trump, Brexit, Trump, Brexit, Trump, and I'm like, I can't do it anymore. I just can't. So I've kind of gone into small subjects. I'm not.
And you have to do that too, because like I say, we don't get to rest. That doesn't mean we don't get tired of it. I think if anything, we get more tired of it because again, we don't get that break. But the news cycle will wear you out. And I think it's important for everybody to, if they can afford to, take a step back and remove themselves from, not completely, divorce yourself from political issues or anything like that. I think it's important for everyone to be politically active, but sometimes you do need to have a recovery period. What's true for the body is true for the brain. The brain needs recovery time. If you keep it stimulated all the time, you're going to fatigue. So,
and saying that, like, I mean, I think that's why because I got myself to a state where, like, I was constantly obsessing over the news when I first started on my channel, and it was like I wanted to keep up to date with everyone so I can get stuff out, because I wanted to do something every week. I was actually going to do maybe 2 a week, try to talk about a concept and then a story, and that was what the format was going to be, and it was just all news, and then obviously I had personal stuff going on, and then the stuff with my dad happened and all that. So I took that month and a bit out, where it's like, I need to just sort my personal shit out and then come back. Yeah. And I think, like, I kind of lost track of everything. Like, I wasn't on Twitter or anything. I wasn't obsessing over what people were saying about various issues. I think the most I was getting in touch with the news was YouTube, but a lot of it I was actually just watching, like, the sort of more, entertainment stuff, not the political stuff, and I kind of lost track of everything that was going on. And I think it was actually really good. It was good to get to the point actually after a while where I was like, I kind of miss it. I actually kind of want to go back. Whereas before that, I was like, I can't I can't do it anymore. I need to take time out. Whereas now I'm at the point where I'm like, no, actually, I kind of want to have a read through a few articles and see what's going on. Do you know what I mean? And I prefer that rather than fatiguing myself.
Yeah. No, and that's good. And, you know, like I said, I encourage that sort of thing because it can wear you out. Some people get energized by this stuff. For some people, you know, it's not all that taxing, and those people are suited, you know, to be involved, like extra involved in politics and stuff like that. But for other people, maybe people who are new to it, or people uh, who just like don't have the same energized feeling when it comes to it, it's very important that, you know, when you can, you find some sort of sanctuary away from all the stress, because otherwise it'll deplete your energy and you'll be useless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I couldn't agree more. And I think I think one of the people I always remember watching back when I was a lot younger was Hank and John Green. I don't know. Do you know who they are?
Yeah, of course.
They used to go on about, you know, internet fatigue and social network fatigue and stuff like that. And I think
absolutely.
I think as much as like I disagree with them on various things and stuff like that, but I think when it comes to when they talk about stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, you're spot on. Like you do need to switch off. You do sometimes need to. Otherwise, you do need to switch off, not just for like getting exhausted and stuff, but it's also for like I find for like the zealotry and the like getting too invested and too stuck in your little sort of bubble. Sometimes you need to come out of it and have a bit of introspection and look at everything that's going on and then come back to it before you end up getting completely consumed. So I think that's what I got to first stage, was just like I was completely consumed by it, and it was actually clouding not just, you know, my perspective on various issues and stuff, but it was also affecting what my goal with my channel was. And it was getting to the point where it wasn't about me talking to people, it was me talking at people. And I kind of realized that and went, oh yeah, okay, I'm gonna step back. You know, like and I think sometimes you need to do that.
And you can do that when it's things that are not your entire life, you know, when it's things that, again, you can afford to take a step back from. I do want to add this though, like there are some people who I hesitate to use the word zealotry, because there are some issues that affect certain groups of people like so like holistically, like they literally cannot take a step back from it. Like take a Native American activist who, you know, is super involved in fighting for their people's rights and for their for everything. They can't go, okay, I'm tired of being treated like a Native American today, I'm just going to take a step back, take a break, go get some perspective, stuff like that. Like, no, they can walk away from maybe the activist side of things, but they're still going to be face to face with the ramifications of those political issues every day of their life. So, and I only say that just to, like, again, to keep perspective, because that was something, because I've held that belief of, you know, taking a step back and recovering for a really long time now. But I only recently, and by recently I mean like a few years ago, realized like that point that there are some people that can't step back, and I think we need to be sympathetic towards them, you know.
Yeah.
So it's important to.
Unless you're lucky enough, and I think like maybe I don't know if it's the same in America, but at least in like the UK, for the most part, like obviously race is still an issue, but for the most part, most of our discussions when it comes to, you know, what people are or you know how they were born is not so much to do with the race that they are, but more to do with the, you know, the ethnicity that they are, the nationality, where they're from. Tends to be a bigger discussion, because obviously we get multicultural country, so we get people from all over. But for the most part, the body of the sort of the most people, the majority of the people who come to the country are obviously from Europe. So obviously race isn't really a component when everybody's, you know, more or less the same race. So it's more to do with sort of nationality that, or it's more to do with ethnicity and nationality that we discussed. But like, I think it's a lot easier, like in places like where I live. It's these cities are multicultural, and we don't really have the thing. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like America kind of has a thing of the I want to say self-segregation because that doesn't sound right, but it's like communities are almost split into they're almost split into ethnic groups. I feel like, or at least that's the way it seems from an outsider looking in. Like when people talk about American cities, it's almost as though you've got your like Asian community lives here, your black community lives here, your white community lives here. Whereas like in the UK, obviously you do get like areas like the area I live in is predominantly Eastern European where I live. But for the most part, we separate things by class. So your lower classes, rough areas, your middle class sort of all right areas, and then your upper class areas. That's more how it's separated. So it's not so much about race, but it's more about ethnicity and class. If that makes sense.
Yeah, well, in the States, it's the two are not exclusive. I would definitely not use the phrase self-segregation. That is definitely not something I would cop to.
I don't think it's necessarily. I don't think it's necessarily a choice, but I sometimes feel like communities, and I think it's just human nature as well. But like you get communities that are like a certain. Well, I think because obviously race is more of a component in America, so you get this sort of like there's an area where these people tend to live, and then to feel like you're part of the community or whatever demographic you want to be a part of, people sometimes maybe gravitate towards those areas. And it's not necessarily that it's always a choice, but I do feel like there can be an element of that, if that makes sense. But it's not, like I said, self-segregation isn't the best word, but I couldn't think of a better term.
Yeah, no, and I understand what you're trying. I do understand what you're trying to say, and I understand the idea behind self-segregation because people are more comfortable in communities where they understand, the language or the cultural norms, or they have similar values and stuff like that. That makes sense. But I definitely don't think the communities in America are separated because people were just more comfy with people that are like them, because oftentimes the people that are like them are living in areas where there's lead paint peeling off the walls, or like where the water's not clean and stuff like that.
I think that's mad that you guys still have lead in your.
Dude, yeah, it's bad. It's bad. And again, like say, because there was the whole redlining thing in Baltimore. Like that's part of our history. That wasn't self-segregation. Blacks could not get credit. They could not live in certain areas because they couldn't afford it, and that was something that was intentionally decided upon by the real estate companies. And so that was not self-segregation at all, and that wasn't because black people just wanted to be around more black people. It was all they could do. And similar things happen with like the Chinatown communities and the Latino communities. I come from like the city I grew up in has a very big Latino Hispanic population, and it's different here. It's there's not so much of an issue of redlining or anything like that, but it's interesting to see how clean the line is between where like the areas that are more friendly to the Hispanic and Latino population versus the white population. So there's definitely more to. You were talking about how it's more by class. I would say that definitely plays a role with us as well.
Obviously, in the US, again, like I don't live there, so it's an outsider looking in. But from US, from what I know, for what I understand, it seems like obviously class and race are very much, and they're very much meshed in with one another. Whereas, like for example, if I was to give like I live in a sort of lower, it's kind of, I would say it's lower middle class. It's like on the cusp of working class, lower class, middle class sort of area. And this area is like it's outside the center. So we've not got the main shopping center and all that, but there's loads of entrepreneurial sort of businesses nearby. There's loads of little shops and stuff like that. Like I don't even, most of the time I don't even need to nick into town if I'm wanting to get a wee bit to eat or anything like that. Like I can nick out to the street. There's plenty of different places. I could get. I mean, there's tattoo parlors and everything around where I live and stuff like that. Like there's loads of little businesses, and we've got like the building I live in is predominantly Eastern European people who own businesses with a couple of native Scots, and I think there's two Russian guys who are lovely. They like their party, but they're lovely.
They like their what?
They like their partying.
Oh, okay.
But they're lovely lads. But they And they're sort of more like me. They do their sort of 9 till 5s and then come home and have a beer sort of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas you've got a lot of other people in this area that are very much sort of they actually have a decent amount of money, but they live here because the housing's cheap enough that you can have money, live in a nice part of town, but also have a disposable income. Whereas like we've got areas like right up where I work is pretty much up in the sort of rougher part of the city. And it's predominantly native Scots that we have up there. It's predominantly people who have lived in the city like generations since the turn of the Industrial Revolution. They've had families living there. Like there's a huge Catholic population right up the back. They've been there forever, and they're sort of like they're the people that are struggling. And I think there's this sort of like disconnect when I talk to people in America, and they talk a lot about when they talk about class and they talk about race. The two things are connected, whereas when I think about class and I think about race, I think the two things are separate, because obviously I'm not used to having that sort of or at least in my country I'm not used to like it being like that. Like I'm not used to assuming that an area that's predominantly, like I'm saying, like the area that I'm in that's predominantly Eastern European is actually more the middle class area, whereas the area that's more lower class is predominantly native Scot. So it's odd to me to assume that a demographic would be linked to that, if that makes sense.
Well, Americans don't like to think of it that way is the problem, because again, Americans know that everybody should be equal. They should be on the same footing, and so to think of it, to say that it's extremely politically incorrect to say that Black people or Hispanic people are second-class citizens. And so instead of actually trying to resolve the issue of them being treated as a different class of people, they just say that they're not. So they treat it like two separate issues as opposed to acknowledging the intersection.
Yeah. And that's like as much as I have like, I try as much, and I think it's just because the way I like to engage with people too, is like I like to see everybody as their own individual person. Like I don't like to look at groups in terms of like homogenizing everybody and seeing them as the same. Well, I know that you need to do that to a degree, obviously, because you can't have a completely individualistic society. I feel like you kind of need a bit of both, sort of. When it comes to discussing various issues, you need a bit of you need to see people as individuals, but also understand the collective, the collective systemic issues that can affect our group of people, our demographic of people.
Yeah.
But
you do.
I think because I try to engage, like even just in terms of discussion, I like to look at people as individuals and not see them just as a representative of an ideology or a group. I think I've got a bad habit, or not a bad habit, but I tend to just look over demographics. I tend to look over what people are and more talk to them as, talk to them in terms of what they believe and what they do and stuff like that.
Right.
I feel like sometimes when I talk to activists in America who are more to the left, they really don't like that. And it's not that I'm trying to annoy them or anything. It's like a disconnect that I have from where I am to what they have where they are. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it depends on the conversation you're having, because like if we're talking just about a single person, it makes more sense to treat them as an individual. But even then, like you can't, if you're so driven, and I'm not saying you do this, but if a person is so driven to only view a person as an individual that they actively try to ignore the identities of the groups that person is a part of, then they're actually ignoring a big part of that person's individuality. So it can kind of backfire if you're not very inclusive with your mindset. Now, again, depending on the conversation you're having, like if you're trying to, and you already acknowledge this, but I'm just trying to throw it out there to keep everything kind of concise. If you're having a conversation about like societal issues, then trying to talk about people as individuals is even more counterproductive, because the analogy that I like to use is the way atoms function versus the way organs in the human body function. Like atoms behave a certain way individually. They behave very differently when they're parts of molecules. And molecules behave differently when they're part of greater compounds and substances. And then eventually, you work your way up to the level of, like, say, a human liver. A human liver, sure, is made up of a bunch of individual atoms, but it does not function like an atom. So you have to acknowledge the scale, or you have to acknowledge the level that you're working at.
Yeah, I do understand that, and I'm
Yeah.
cognizant of it. It's one of those things. I mean, yeah, I don't, it's one of those. I don't want to say that it's a cultural thing, because obviously it's not like it's completely abstract to me. Obviously, we do have these sort of connections between ethnicity and race and stuff like that. It's not like it's absent from my culture. It's just not. We don't. It's not that we don't talk about it much. It's just not as pronounced, or at least not up here. I know down in like London and places like that, obviously they have a slightly different. Like in England, it's slightly different. Obviously, a different country, really. But I mean, they do have different issues. But up here, for the most part, at least to my eye, at least to what I see on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't seem to be something that's really talked about all that, or not talked about, but it's not something that really plays a huge part in the sort of the class differentiations that we have in society. It tends to be totally to do with circumstances and the areas you live in, associations. Like I've had issues where, like, when I lived in a slightly lower class area back before I moved to this city, and I obviously, like, I was I had a decent education and I worked hard at school and I did all these things. But when I was looking for a job, it took me almost a year to get my first job sorted out. I think a lot of it was nothing to do with me being. People weren't looking at my race or my sex. People were going, "Oh, but he's from this part of town. Like, that's a bit. Maybe we'll just get an applicant from the nicer part of town." And that was the issue that we sort of have. It's the sort of like the association you have with certain areas and certain classes that we have a problem with here. Or at least that's what I come in contact with more.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And no, and please don't misunderstand me. I wasn't trying to dismiss your perspective. I was actually trying to like to support it, actually, because there are people that will completely overlook the individual case of the discussion. The bigger thing I was just trying to get at is not necessarily that you specifically had to do this, but that people in general, when we're having these conversations, we have to acknowledge, at what scale, like what type of conversation are we having?
Yeah, and I totally get that. No, I didn't see it as a. It was more just me trying to clarify my position.
Yeah, sure.
Because I know I'm not articulating myself clearly now, because it's like nearly 4 a.m, so I'm like, oh.
Oh yeah, no, and I'm pretty bad about it too. I've found that I am not very good without a script. I will go on forever in a random direction. So
see, I don't script my videos that I do. I just kind of talk off the cuff. But I found that, like, I love editing and I hate editing, because I love editing because I enjoy doing it. I enjoy trying to, like, take something that's just like noise and turn it into something that's actually decent. But I've found that now, like, because I don't script my videos, I just between the fact that I have the speech impediment, that means that I kind of like I don't stutter anymore, but I just, like, I get stuck on words for ages.
Yeah.
So there's these big pauses that I have to cut. I go like that all the time. And then obviously I'm going off the cuff, so I sit and chat and talk. And the last video I did, it came down to like 20 minutes, but I think I had an hour and 40 minutes worth to fucking edit through.
Yeah, no, that's annoying. But hey, the thing, like, I think everybody deals with that to some extent or another. I know I do. So you're not alone on that one.
Oh, I'm terrible, especially when like now. Like, I love doing live streams like this because I like talking off the cuff. But there's, like, it's difficult sometimes to either, like, you can't recall what it is you're trying to articulate, or you can't recall what it is you're thinking of, or you can't articulate your thought properly, and there's that sort of irritation where you're like, I wish I could just cut this bit out and then put it properly.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. That's where like editing has been a saving grace for me because with my ADD and everything, I tried to just do the off the cuff, talking about what comes to my mind thing. But I found that if I just let myself go, I will wind up like on the other side of the planet topic wise.
Oh
Like
yeah, I
we
mean,
will not even be talking about the same thing, and you wind up with a 3-hour video that you can't even follow. So
I think like, this is what's happened with this because we're both the same in that respect. Because I can do that. I because I can talk forever.
yeah.
And I'll just end up like jumping from what like I'll conclude what I was talking about when that came to the initial issue, and then I'll go, oh, but here's something that kind of connects, and then move on, and you end up miles away. And like I think that's what's happened with this because we're both the same in that respect. So we've ended up like miles away from. Well, I can't even remember what we were meant to be talking about.
Well, I also think that's typical of live streams too. Like I've seen that happen with a lot of YouTubers that I follow when they do live streams together. They never stay on topic 100% of the time.
No, and you're not really wanting to. I mean, the initial topic is just it's a groundwork, so you at least know where you're starting, or you have something to talk about. But luckily enough, we've ended up in a situation where we had plenty to talk about, which is good because I was worried that we'd have none. Everybody that would be like, we'd talk maybe for 15 minutes about the topic and then be sat in awkward silence. And I'm glad.
No, that'd be terrible. That would be terrible.
So I'm thinking maybe 10 more minutes till 4 o'clock, and then I'll stop the broadcast, and then we can say our taras and stuff like that.
I'm actually thinking we could, if you don't mind, I'm actually thinking we should probably like go ahead and move that up to right now because I got to start getting ready for bed myself.
Oh, that's no bother.
So, real quick, just how do you feel about this little experiment, trying your first live stream?
I think the live stream is really, really good. I named the stream the agree to disagree thing. Was something I had in my sort of mind for a while because I've been thinking about getting people on to talk about specific topics, but obviously people that have slightly different perspectives, and I thought it'd be interesting. I thought it was a decent title for that sort of.
Yeah, no, that was really good. I thought that was a good choice, and I like the image you got pulled up for it too.
I think that's just my channel banner. I think it's just.
Oh, is it? Oh, I didn't make the connection. So, well, it was still good. It's a good channel banner.
I never updated the channel banner to the one I've got on Twitter, which is I spent like 2 days trying to get. That's pathetic. That's the sad thing. Like, because I'm so bad with Photoshop, can't do Photoshop. So I spent like 2 days getting that bloody Twitter thing that I have in my intro that like it's got the horrible the aspect ratio distortion. You know, the zoom in the intro to my videos. It's that I hate it. It's got the aspect ratio distortion on it when it zooms, and I can't fix it, and I really hate it.
It's all right.
But yeah, no. So I'm glad. No, this has been really good fun. Unfortunately, I need to network more with folk. I think that's been my main problem so far on the channel. Is I'm like, with you, it was kind of struck gold because we kind of just came across each other by mistake. Actually, I think it was me. I was slightly.
Yeah, you found me, dude. I don't know.
I came across you because it was Bradney. It was Brittany Simon. Because I used to have conversations with her a wee while. That was when I first started. And she liked a post that you did, and I think I was slightly. I think I'd had a couple of drinks, and I was like, "Oh, I'll just fucking tweet." So I tweeted something. I think it was slightly. It wasn't like sarky or anything, but I think it was just slightly jokey and jovial, and then that was kind of how we bumped into each other.
Yeah, no, I don't even remember what that initial tweet was, but I do remember you came across. The initial feeling was not hostile, but you came in ready to play. You know, you came in ready to bump heads if need be. But I didn't think you were disingenuous. I didn't think you were a troll. So
no, I think it was because I think I'd had a couple of glasses of wine.
Well, maybe that's your ticket. Maybe that's where you need to be when you go hunting for people to network with.
Well, that's not a healthy lifestyle.
No, I guess not. No.
Cigarettes and wine. That's the lifestyle. Cigarettes, wine, and Twitter. That's a way to cause a heart attack, I think.
Oh yeah, I guess so.
But yeah, no, like yeah, I think it's struck gold with bumping into you, but I'm not very good with the networking thing. I don't know about you, like.
I really appreciate the the dynamic we've had. It's helped keep me active on my YouTube channel, and it's given me more to think about, and it's made me, again, excited to meet more people, which I tend to have an easy time meeting with people, but online it's a different beast for sure. So.
And I think as well, like it's easy enough to, because I think I went through it as well. It's easy enough to see everybody who, like, because I know we agree for the most part, but we do have our moments where we butt heads and stuff. But for the most part, we can, like, for the most part, actually, I think we do have a lot of differences, but we can agree, or we can at least compromise. And I think sometimes it's good to bump into someone who has different perspectives from you, but is willing to actually, at the very least, not agree or even compromise, but at least give you a fair shake and leave the conversation going, do you know what? I disagree. Maybe I don't like the stance he came out with, but I'll talk to him again. That's chill. I think that's sometimes nice. And I think I was having that issue. I think I was having that issue with, like, everyone I was talking to, I was having a conversation. It was always ending up sour for the most part. It was always ending up where the person going, or me going, and not talking ever again. And I think it's nice to have bumped into someone that I can disagree with, but then come back to and go, we disagreed last time, or we compromised last time, but let's talk about something else and see how we think about it. Yeah. Or just talk about random stuff as well, because there's plenty of times I think we've just tweeted nonsense.
That worked out pretty well this time.
So yeah, I will let you head off, or I'll stop the broadcast just now.
There we go. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's no bother.